All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Tom Brady went on the Pat McAfee show and talked with McAfee a little bit about Brock Purdy. And we'll talk a little bit about that coming up next. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Go check out Pig and a Pickle. Ask for the brisket chili. Talk to Damon and Mary, the owners of the restaurant, and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. Also, this video brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, and they will match you up to your first $100. All right, let's talk a little bit about two guys that often get compared to each other, and that's Brock Purdy, a 7th-round pick out of Iowa State by the 49ers, and Tom Brady, who was the 6th-round pick of the Patriots about a quarter century ago. And Brady joined the Pat McAfee show. And, you know, one of the I don't know if you call it rumors, because I think everybody kind of accepts it as fact at this point, but Kyle Shanahan, according to reports, pursued Tom Brady last year in the offseason, as recently as last year, and trying to encourage him to come out of retirement and play for the Niners for one season. And a lot of people sit there and go, how could Kyle have done that to Purdy now that Purdy has led the Niners to the Super Bowl? And you got to remember, Brock Purdy was coming off of major UCL reconstruction surgery. They had obviously made their evaluation that they didn't want to go forward with Trey Lance, that Lance was way, way too raw for the team that they had assembled to try to win a Super Bowl with Lance. So that's the part, you know, when John Lynch was asked about Trey Lance at the Combine last year, and he made it seem like, you know, the Niners had a major problem. And it's amazing how many people were living in denial and not see the obvious conflict that John Lynch presented when he spoke to the media at the Combine. You say, well, what are you talking about, Krug? He's like, he was asked about Trey Lance. And I think most Niner fans at that point were thinking, okay, yeah, Trey's coming off of surgery, but Brock's coming off of surgery, and they'll just compete this summer, and the winner will be the quarterback this year, and the loser will be the backup. But it was never going to go that way, right? It was never going to go that way. One, because Trey Lance was due to make $9 million this year. So the Niners didn't want a $9 million backup quarterback, and they sure as hell didn't want a $9 million third-string quarterback. So when John was asked about it, what did he say? He said, well, you know, Trey's got to play. Trey's got to play to develop, and that's the issue, because we've got a team that's ready to roll right now. And what he was saying without saying it is that in our evaluation, Trey's not ready to play and won't be ready to play next year. And so he's not our choice to lead us to the Super Bowl. And he didn't say, hey, we're trying to trade Trey. He didn't want to come out that because he didn't know what he had in Brock, and he didn't have another option. But according to reports, Kyle Shanahan pursued Tom Brady last offseason with the idea that he would play this 2023 season and that Brock Purdy would back him up. And he even talked to Brock Purdy about it. And Purdy supposedly didn't like it, but he understood. He understood. I don't know if I'm coming back or will be able to come back or make this comeback. I'm hoping that I can come back from major elbow surgery, but there's no guarantees. And the Niners need to think about how they win this year with this team. And it wasn't going to ever be with Trey Lance. So, you know, it's interesting. Brock was trying to come back after the UCL surgery, and it sounded like the Niners and Shanahan and maybe Lynch reached out to Brady. Here's Brady with McAfee talking a little bit about Purdy and about the Niners showing interest in the offseason.
Grew up watching the San Francisco 49ers. There was a report that Kyle Shanahan potentially tried to lure you out of retirement to come be quarterback. He told Brock Purdy that. Brock Purdy is, handled it in the exact way that you would expect Brock Purdy, that we've learned him. Upset about it, but also understanding. This is going to happen every year for you. People are going to try to talk you out of retirement. And what do you think about Brock Purdy being maybe the next, it would have to be 22 more years of this. But, maybe the next Tom Brady. It seems like he has the it factor. He's obviously been underappreciated and underthought. What are your thoughts on Brock Purdy leading the Niners? And what are your thoughts on people trying to lure you out of retirement pretty much every offseason, I would assume, until you're 60 years old, probably?
Yeah, I think Brock's done a great job with the opportunity. He got it, and he's taken advantage of it. He was a late-round pick. I know he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he wants to go out there and prove every day that he's the right fit for that team. And there's a great again, it's a great organization they're running. I really respect Kyle, but Brock's done a hell of a job. And, I think in football, whether you're a free agent, I've heard so many draft stories from when I was drafted. Oh, I was a scout for the Packers at the time. And, oh, I was a scout for the Colts at the time. And had we taken you? And I think you can look at everything in football and say, what if? And the reality is I deal with what happened and the decisions that were made, whether it was free agency for me, whether it was signing contracts with the Patriots. And, in this last off season, there's a lot of different things that people would suggest. But I kind of just kept my mind focused on where I wanted to go. And, again, this was a great year for me to sit back and watch and learn and get prepared for being in the Fox booth next year.
The Colts should have,
Yeah.
Yep,
I know you
for sure.
paid non
Come on, Colt. Mm-hmm.
But when you were a free agent.
All right, that was Tom Brady with Pat McAfee. And as you can see there, Brady always plays his cards very close to the vest. When he was asked about it, what did he say? He said, well, Brock's done a great job. He's done a great job with this opportunity. Then he went on to say, I really respect Kyle. I really respect the 49er organization. He then kind of referenced that kind of like the way Brady had a chip on his shoulder, that Brock was a late round guy too, and is carrying a pretty big chip on his shoulder. And the only thing that Brady would really add for McAfee was, he didn't want to talk in any detail about the 49ers reaching out or what they said or what he said, but he just said in this interview with McAfee, I stayed focused on, doing what I was doing, which was staying retired and prepping, using this year as prep to step into that Fox TV booth next year. And, it really is interesting. I mean, you look at the Niners wanted Tom Brady, and they looked into the idea. First of all, they passed on him in the draft in '99. Obviously, it wasn't smart. But if you go back, that was a previous regime, several regimes ago. That was Bill Walsh, Steve Mariucci, Greg Knapp, Terry Donahue, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. They had decided that they were going to look for, instead of the next Joe Montana, they were going to look for somebody who had that dual threat of mobility and, that Steve Young type athleticism. And they wanted a smart guy. And so they put very stringent rules on what they were looking for in '99. And so Gio Carmazzi was their guy. Why? Because he had done really well in all the athletic testing. He was a Sacramento guy, just like Greg Knapp. He had like a 4.0 GPA. He was a very good prospect on paper. He was smart. He was athletic. And they were like, oh, what? He checks all the boxes. Except they really didn't study him as a football player enough. And he obviously never had enough arm. And he stepped in the first preseason game against Tom Brady in the Hall of Fame game, played poorly, was sacked, and made zero impact and was quickly vanished from the scene. But it was interesting. The Niners then pursued Brady again. This was after Jimmy Garoppolo led them to a Super Bowl appearance against Kansas City in Super Bowl 54 4 years ago. But then they kind of hedged their bet, and I can't really blame them either, because at that point, what were they looking at? They were looking at Jimmy G, who had just led the Niners to a Super Bowl berth, was very popular with the players in the locker room, and was only 29, and theoretically was getting better, and already had shown some limitations, but he'd also shown the ability to at least get the Niners to the Super Bowl. And Tom Brady at that point was 43. And how many quarterbacks 43 get better or still produce or aren't in just steep decline? So they gambled on age and stayed with Jimmy, and Brady was pissed, and he went to Tampa, and then he went and led the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a Super Bowl. And then the 49ers, had to watch that from afar as Jimmy G's skill level eroded. He never really improved. He became less of a downfield passer every year that went by. And Brady kept going. Brady was good at 44, 45, 40. He won the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers and was great doing it. So now fast forward to this offseason. You don't know what you have in Brock. You know that you like him, but you don't know if he's healthy. And so and they knew they didn't want to go with Trey Lance. So that was clear. And so they considered Brady, and they even went as far as to tell Brady, hey, tell Purdy, hey, you know what, we're going to go with Tom Brady. And luckily they didn't, because Tom Brady, if his final year in the NFL wasn't great, he probably would have been worse this year. Purdy instead got healthy. The Niners instead signed Sam Darnold and Brandon Allen, traded Trey Lance in the 11th hour for a 4th-round pick in the upcoming April draft from Dallas, and went forward with Brock. And now Brock's 1 win away from winning the Super Bowl. So interesting little dialogue between Tom Brady and Pat McAfee on the McAfee Show. All right, I linked the Tom Brady entire McAfee segment in the description, so you can check that out for yourself. But really interesting that, he never goes too far. Brady never gives you too much. He never goes too far in analyzing Brock. He never gives you too many details. All we really got out of this was that, yeah, the Niners came looking for him, and he stayed focused on what he wanted to stay focused on, which was staying retired, sitting out this year, and prepping to be the best Fox TV announcer he can be next year when his Fox deal begins. So interesting little dialogue with Brady and McAfee. I would advise all of you guys to check it out. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. And thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.